available to attend this webinar this evening? Great, okay, we'll continue. Thanks, Krishma. And Krishma behind the scenes is making sure that we're all operating as we should be this evening, so I really appreciate her support this evening. So we'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands that we gather on today and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples with us this evening. Thank you. You can see here we've got a bit of an agenda of items that we were going to be covering between Prachi and myself, and to prepare you for your application. We do encourage you to wait until the end of the webinar before asking questions, and I know you'll be quite keen to ask us some questions, but we're likely that we will cover your questions in this webinar. And just to be fair to all the attendees, we will be answering general FSP eligibility and programme questions this evening. We will endeavour to answer your questions through the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. So if you do have any questions, perhaps post them through there and not through the chat. Thank you. So, undertaking your GP training with us here at the RACGP. Just a few pointers here to share as general. We'd like to highlight that we've supported more than 23,000 GPs to achieve fellowship since we opened. And we are Australia's largest professional general practice organisation and represent more than 40,000 GPs across this country, working in or towards a career in general practice. We are delivering AGPT as well as the FSP programs under a professional-led model, bringing GP training in line with other medical specialist training programs that you may be aware of. And we'll cover a little bit more about all three programs, but tonight's focus is mainly on the FSP program, the Fellowship Support Program. Thank you, Krishna. So I'll let you have a look at that. Why start the journey to the RACGP Fellowship? And just at a high level there, as you can see, we do support 9 out of every 10 GPs annually who work towards a fellowship in general practice. As mentioned, we've over 40,000 members, which allows us to advocate for GPs in all levels of government. We also provide dedicated support for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander applying for FSP and GPs working towards fellowship. You may also be aware, as of January 2022, an RACGP approved program is required as a component of exam eligibility for all GPs in training. Thank you, Krishma. Here's just a snapshot of the 3 programs we're currently administering through and supporting through the college. Just as we mentioned, tonight we really are going to be talking about the Fellowship Support Program, which commenced in 2023. You may know about the AGPT program, the Australian General Practice Training Program, and the Remote Vocational Training Scheme. These fellowship pathways are underpinned by the RACGP standards for general practice training, and the standards describe the expected outcomes of a quality and safe training program. So regardless of which training program out of the 3 that we just showed you, the standards cover supervision and practice environment, education and training and teaching and assessment. And like we said, on the completion of one of those programs, you will have met the RACGP approved program requirement of eligibility for the fellowship exams. There are also other requirements for fellowship exams which relate to general practice experience and medical registration. And we'll talk a little bit about that this evening, which relates specifically to the Fellowship Support Program, which nicely takes us to the next part. Okay, thanks, Krishma. So for the Fellowship Support Program, we're going to be covering a little bit about specifics for medical registration, job and approved placement, exams, supervision, and practice accreditation. Thank you, Krishna. Okay, this one's a big one. Medical registration requirements. So if you are considering submitting an application for the Fellowship Support Program, which opened for applications yesterday, you must hold registration under General, Provisional by Competent Authority Pathway or Standard Pathway with AMC Certificate, Level 2, Supervision and above, or Limited, Level 2, Supervision and above, by the application close. This enables full scope of practice when you're coming into the program. By application close, that is the 27th of July 2023. If you have supervision requirements on your medical registration, your FSP nominated supervisor must be your ARPA supervisor, and you'll get prompted for that in the application. It'll ask you to nominate a supervisor. So if you've got one already that's been nominated on your ARPA medical registration, that is the person that you need to then add to your application. If you have approved sites on your medical registration as a condition, your FSP placement that you enter into your application must match your approved sites, again by application close. And you must hold registration without any restrictions, conditions or undertakings or suspensions that limit the scope of practice. If you do have any conditions, it just means we may just require further information. It doesn't mean that you cannot apply. So if you do have any conditions on your medical registration or any undertakings or any restrictions or suspensions, we will just ask you to supply us that information with your application as that gets reviewed by our eligibility review panel. We've just do note there in brackets at the bottom, you know, that ARPA has a quite a lengthy processing time. So if you do have conditions on your, on your medical registration, such as approved sites, just note that, and maybe you can work with ARPA or a case officer there to see if they can expedite your application if your approved sites don't match your FSP placement. And just a note at the end of that, medical registration supervised level needs to be at level 2. So if you think that you're likely to get level 2 by the time the applications close on the 27th, maybe you just hold on to submitting your application till quite late, until just before the applications close. Because if you only hold level 1 supervision, the application will not let you progress past the initial quiz of the application. Thank you, Krishna. Job offer. So applicants, when you're applying, you must have a job or a job offer at the point of your application, because we're going to ask you for the details of where you're looking to do your placement. You may already be at that placement, or you may look to intend to start there at the start of the program, which starts in January 2024. So for a placement, you need to be able to work there a minimum part-time hours of 14.5 hours per week over 2 sessions, and 10.5 of which must be face-to-face, and they must be during daytime hours. And that makes a little bit sense of when we describe a little bit more of what's not going to be an eligible placement. You must be able to demonstrate a contractual arrangement to provide medical services for at least 6 months in the same practice from the commencement of the first term of the FSP program, which again starts in January 2024. It needs to be an approved placement, which then you're able to provide comprehensive general practice as a service, and these are in line with our standards. The location of the practice should be in an MM2 to 7 location, and you can check the location of your practice on this Well Health Workforce Locator. Just noting those 2 points at the bottom, approved medical deputising services are not eligible for FSP as they will not give you the full scope of practice. And if your FSP placement has a majority of hours in the extended after hours period, this will not also be eligible for FSP because again, you will not be able to be seeing a full scope of presentations. Thank you, Krishna. Thanks, Krishna. We're now going to talk a little bit about the training site accreditation. Some of you may already be aware of this, but we're going to really highlight this in the next coming slides. Thanks, Krishna. So when you enter your placement into your FSP application, if you've already had a look at the application, you may note that it asks you for all this information. So you get prompted in the application itself. But it is important that you do check that the placement holds accreditation status, and that status doesn't expire until at least until the commencement of the training program, which starts in January 2024. Or if it's about to expire, you've got re-accreditation in place, and your practice managers will be able to support you with answering those questions because they also will be part of filling in your application as well. They complete the letter of support, so they'll be able to provide that information for you. But it is really important that you are responsible for submitting your application and you ensure that the practice does hold accreditation till then. So for the practice to be considered as an eligible training site, it needs to hold accreditation against the standards, and it needs to be able to support yourself and provide a safe clinical learning environment. It needs to provide adequate patient numbers to ensure you gain sufficient experience covering both depth and breadth of general practice. And it needs to provide a suitably equipped and dedicated patient consulting room. And it should be located in an MM2 to 7. It must also agree to undertake some virtual site visits with the RACGP to be accredited as a training site, and this is usually undertaken within the 6 months of you commencing in that placement, so likely to be early next year. If at all you know that the practice is accredited a site for AGPT, they're likely to be deemed accredited and no further action is required. And again, that kind of information your practice manager will be able to provide you. Thank you, Krishna. Okay, supervision. We'll talk a little bit about supervision. So again, when you start completing your FSP application, it will prompt you for the details of your supervisor. When you're in the program, the FSP registrars are required to be appropriately supervised and receive both clinical and educational supervision whilst on the program. You need to nominate your supervisor at the time of application, and remembering if you do have an approved supervisor as part of your medical registration, then they are the ones that you would add into your application. Also a note that your nominated supervisor is limited to a maximum of 3 to support 3 GPs in training across AGPT and FSP. So it might be useful just to ask them that question. So your supervisor, whilst might be very keen to support you, maybe just ask them if they have capacity, as there is a ruling for them that they can only support 3 GPs in training across the AGPT and FSP programs. Most likely you'll find that your supervisor that you are going to nominate is actually on site. However, if they're not, and some reason you are unable to be supported by an on-site supervisor, you will be asked a question in the application that if you have an off-site supervisor who's likely then to support you. And if that's the case, you will be prompted to provide us a supervisor plan with your application. And then that will be reviewed by one of our medical educators. Thank you. So when we're looking at a supervisor, we want to ensure that they're going to be able to have the qualities and the experience and the qualifications to be able to support you through the FSP program. So your nominated supervisor should be an excellent professional and clinical role model for you, but also needs to provide some evidence that they absolutely have the qualifications to do so as well. And that means they're either a fellow of the college, the Royal Australian College of GPs, or they're a fellow of the Australian College of Rural and Remote Medicine. They have full and unrestricted registration as a GP under APRA, and they preferably at least 4 years of experience working in general practice in Australia, post-fellowship, and can show us evidence of current professional development. And hopefully, or substantially, part of their work is in the same location as yourself. But like we mentioned in the previous one, if they are off-site, then there is some additional information we will request from you in the application. Thank you, Krishma. I'm now going to hand over to Prachi, who will cover the next few slides for you. Thank you, Prachi.
Thank you, Amy. Good evening, everyone. I'll now take you through some of information in regards to the FSP provider number. Next slide. Thanks, Karishma. So the medical provider numbers. Medical provider numbers for FSP are issued under the General Practice Fellowship Program Placement Guidelines. And this document provides you information about which placements will be eligible for FSP provider number. We cannot today, just to let everyone know, we cannot answer specific questions about provider numbers today because some circumstances can be unique, but this is just a general information in regards to FSP provider numbers issued within the program. So we are giving you information. So the guidelines will help you provide you information about the provider number and placements. You can use the Health First Locator website. Will also provide you information about your location and DPA status, so which will enable you to find out if the practice that you're intending to work at or already working at is eligible for a FSP provider number. One thing to note here is if you are deemed eligible to enter the FSP, it is expected that all applicants begin the FSP intake working in the placement location that was listed in the application. Generally, applications for change in a practice will not be accepted 3 calendar months before you commence your training in FSP or for 3 calendar months after commencement of training in FSP, except if there are some exceptional or unforeseen circumstances. If for some reason or you end up moving locations, unless it falls under exceptional circumstances, you may have to reapply and start in an intake that will come later. So you may not be able to start in January. You may have to come in a later intake. Next slide, please. Thanks. All provider numbers are authorized under FSP are limited to areas classified as MM2 to 7 on the Health Force Locator app. We really do not have any FSP locations that can be approved under MM1 category. An applicant can hold a maximum of 2 provider numbers under the FSP. All applications for provider number authorization must be processed through the RACGP. So once you complete your application, you get an approval, and then you've been sent an agreement to sign and Medicare forms to complete. Just bear in mind that you will have send these through to the RACGP, because if you send them directly through Medicare, this will delay the processing of them. If you need any further information about this, or you want to discuss any particular situation about your provider numbers, we would recommend that you email our approved placement team. The email address is on the slide, and they will be able to help you with specific queries about provider numbers for your locations that you are wanting to apply in this round. I'll now talk about I'll give you a general overview about the FSP program. So what does the program look like? The FSP is an education and training program which involves self-directed learning, in-practice learning, and optional workshops. You will be undertaking work-based assessments for feedback and progress monitoring in a training accredited practice under supervision. So work-based assessments are done in your workplace. So it's like your direct observations with your patients by your GP supervisor and medical educators who will be allocated to you to assess actual performance in your general practice setting. WBA is a key, the work-based assessment is a key part of progressive assessment, which informs progress throughout training. During the FSP, you will be required to participate in additional education activities. One of them is called the Early Assessment of Supervision Learning. For short form is EASL, an event analysis, a recent audit, an evidence-based medicine review, and also diversity of practice activity if applicable. You will also have regular education sessions with your supervisor and monthly education sessions with your medical educator. There are 2-day workshops twice yearly, which are optional, and it's up to you if you would like to attend or not. There will be separate fees or entry fees for those. In addition to any supervision requirements for your medical registration, you will meet your supervisor for 1 hour each day for the first 2 weeks of the program. So this is part of the early assessment of supervision learning plan, wherein you will meet with your supervisor every day for the first 2 weeks. This time will be used to orient you to the FSP. If you are new to the practice, then the practice itself, the practice systems, develop a learning and supervision plan and conduct some initial WBS for that early assessment of supervision learning. After this first 2 weeks, you will meet with your supervisor for 1 hour per fortnight in the first year and 1 hour per month in the second year for educational supervision. During your during your FSP, you will be allocated a medical educator. So you will have a medical educator who's been allocated, who you can approach for questions, and you will have a training coordinator or a program admin allocated to you. Next slide, please. Thank you. Program time obligations. So the FSP is a 2-year program. Though in case if anyone's interested in completing a rural generalist fellowship, this might change depending on when they take this up. You need to be, so the FSP, let me just go back. So the program is constructed of 4 terms, essentially, term 1, 2, 3, and 4. Typically, everyone will complete 2 years, 2 full calendar years. But you may also have an option, you may be offered an option for a recognition of prior learning and a reduction of your program time to 18 months from 2 years. This is done in the second term of the program, and there's no application per se. What we'll be reviewing is your progress throughout the first term, and also reviewing if your general practice assessment that you have officially completed through the GP application process through the college. All FSP registrars are expected to complete their education and training requirements within 5 calendar years from commencement of training. All education and training requirements have to be completed within the 2 years, and post-education requirements need to be completed within 3 calendar years following the start of your program. So as mentioned earlier, it is a fully funded program, fully funded by participants, self-funded. So the fees are here for you to have a look. So in the first year, the cost is 20,000, and the year 2, the cost is 12,000. The fees are payable term-wise, so for each 6 months. So for the first term example, the fees will be 10,000, second term 10,000, and so on and so forth. We do have some payment options available. including installment payments. And also we have the Commonwealth Bank, which is offering some personal loans at discounted rates to FSP registrars. There is a link on our website that can give you more information in regards to this. However, once you've been deemed eligible and you do receive a program agreement, you will be provided with all the options for payments and how the payments will work for your term. So some of the benefits of doing the fellowship support program, it's a 24-month program. And basically, the reason why we assess eligibility and everything is to make sure that all that time is counted towards your exam eligibility and in turn your general practice experience. You can access full A1 Medicare rebates. You have a dedicated education phase and a post-education phase. During the education phase, you are supported by a medical educator, your supervisor, and program admin. It's a pathway to sit fellowship exams under the general practice experience eligibility pathway. You can stay in the same practice for the duration of the program. You're not expected to change practices unless obviously you need to change practices due to certain reasons. You can access online training resources, and you also have the support of medical educators. We also focus on individual learning needs and choose which areas of general practice you need to develop. So this can be done in tandem with your supervisor when you put together that early assessment plan for yourself, a supervision plan and areas that you need to focus on. You also gain the skills and knowledge to provide the highest quality of care to your community. Here are some key dates. So the applications are already open and they will close on Thursday, 27th of July. We are expecting to send the applications outcomes by the end of August. And once everything is outcomes are sent out, we are aiming to send out program agreements in September with the program start date of January. I'm going to go and now hand it over to Amy just to quickly recap the eligibility and take you through the rest of it.
Great. Thank you very much, Prachi. Hopefully everyone's found the webinar to be very useful with some key information to support you applying for the program and a little bit of understanding of what the program entails. So just to recap, I suppose, what you'll need to have ready for completing your application is that you need to hold your medical registration and supervision at level 2 by the close of the application, which is 27th of July. You should have a job or a job offer, which you will start and intend to be in for 6 months starting January 2024. The placement must be in an MM2 to 7 location, must be accredited and have an expiry, which takes you up to the program commencement of January 2024, or you should demonstrate it's got a re-accreditation process underway. Ensuring that you've got supervisor details ready to enter into your application. Remembering if you've got an approved supervisor on your medical registration, then they're the ones that you would nominate in your application. And if you've got, maybe just perhaps ask your supervisor if they can absolutely accommodate you, remembering they can only support 3 GPs in training across the AGPT and the FSP program. And if you do have approved sites on your ARPA medical registration, they should also be matching the practice that you're going to enter into your application. Thank you, Krishma. So we've covered quite a bit of information for you this evening, and just wanted to give you some contact details if you've got any specific questions relating to your own circumstances. So if you've got questions relating to your application and your eligibility, we encourage you to email us at theeligibility@racgp.org.au, and we'll support you. Our team will support you with your specific questions. If you've got questions regarding your Medicare provider number, again, that email address, approvedplacement@racgp.org.au. If you've got specific questions relating to the parts that Prachi covered this evening, relating to the program itself, then email us at the fspadmin@racgp.org.au. And if you've got any questions regarding your practice accreditation, then email us at fspaccreditation@racgp.org.au. So hopefully everyone's found that overview this evening to be of value. Prachi, I can see some questions. Which we may, if we can find general questions in the chat, we will, in the Q&A, we will try to respond to them. If we find that they are specific, we will encourage you to contact us. Maybe, Krishma, if you can just give us those email addresses again on the screen, and we encourage you to then email your questions specifically to those email addresses that we'll just put back onto the screen again if we can get there. Oh, okay. So I'm just going to have a quick look to see what questions have come up in the Q&A.
Yeah, I'm having a look, Amy, to
Okay,
one of the
great.
questions. It could be applicable if you've already done the PEP program and if you sat the recently CCE and you are thinking of joining the FSP. Yes, you can. We just need to be sure that you still have exam candidacy remaining when you join FSP, and so that candidacy will enable you to sit the exams after you completed all the requirements.
Okay, thank you. I can see someone's asked a question about their CV. I'm happy if you've got already a CV in detail to upload that to your application. That's fine. Health workforce locator seems to be out of date. It's not something that we manage here directly, but do encourage you to perhaps provide some feedback. I do understand that it's updated regularly. I don't know if Prachi, you know much more about the health.
No, but I believe they might be in the process of updating this, but we are not responsible for that. So it's the Department of Health, and they must be in the process of updating with all the new location classifications.
Okay. Just a general question about exams and fees that, program fees that Prachi shared, and somebody's asked about exam fees. So the fellowship support program, I think Prachi shared a little bit of an overview of what those fees could be, and those are just relating to the program. The fellowship exams have a separate fee. They're not inclusive in any of that.
Yes, the fellowship exams will have a separate fee, and also please note the membership fees are also separate in addition to the FSP program. And if there are workshops being offered which are additional, those will be separate as well. There's a question about how much FSP program will provide support in terms of learning and training. So we have a dedicated education program in terms of you have your monthly sessions with your medical educators who will take you through specific topics. You do have one-on-one sessions with them at least once a term with an end of term, progress review. We also outline the education fortnightly education sessions that you have with your supervisor. We also outline the topics that you can cover. So that's the kind of support that we do in terms of providing that information to your supervisor and yourself to take you through those educational topics over the duration of the program.
Someone did ask a question about the MM227. That is a requirement for the placement for FSP. If you do have an extenuating and unforeseen circumstance which may require you to stay in an MM1 location, that's the only time we may look at it. We do encourage you to have a look at our website for that information to see if your circumstances do actually meet those requirements, and you'd be required to then submit an extenuating and unforeseen circumstance application at the time of your FSP application. It cannot be looked at before.
Looking at another question about how does a GP become an accredited supervisor in time for a training to apply. So it's not an expectation that the supervisor is accredited at the start as soon as you commence the program. If the supervisor meets all the other criteria of being a fellow, having unrestricted specialist medical registration without any conditions and notations, and they're not exceeding the three registrars, they will be eligible to supervise, and then we will work with them to bring them up to speed in terms of accreditation. They will have to complete a few education modules to ensure they meet the accreditation requirements, and then they will be officially. So within the first 6 months of your program, the accreditation team will work with them to get them accredited for the FSP.
There's another question about supervision level 2 at the time of our application. So if you don't think you're going to meet that level 2 supervision at the time that the applications close on the 27th, yes, we are encouraging you then to reapply for the next intake, and the next intake will open then in January. We have 2 intakes for applications, usually mid-year, like we've just opened one yesterday, and then the second one's likely to be in January or February, actually. So we do encourage you to then wait until you do meet that requirement.
Looking at a question about payments from practice, is it VR or non-VR agreement rates? So just to be clear, there's no practice payments within FSP. The A1 rebate that you would get while working under an FSP provider number, it's the A1 medical rebate. So that's, I think, the VR rate that you will receive.
There's a question about supervisors. Can I get a supervisor who sits in an MM1? I think when we listed the requirements for supervision, and if you're sitting in an MM2 location, that would be a remote supervisor. So you can just complete the paperwork for a remote off-site supervisor with your application, and it will be reviewed, as long as they meet all the other requirements which we mentioned, i.e. they're a fellowship of one of the colleges, etc. So they do need to meet those requirements. And when you do have a conversation with them, they will likely know about that criteria before they are able to commit to you supervising you as well.
I just had a quick question about sitting exams while you're doing the FSP. So no, you're not allowed to sit the exams while you are completing your education and training within the FSP. If you are still in the process of applying and not entered FSP, yes, you can. But if once you enter the program, say January, you have commenced the program, you will not be able to sit the exams till you have satisfactorily completed all the requirements of the program and exam eligibility.
Someone who's got a placement in MM6, that's an eligible placement. Your medical registration, as long as you meet the medical registration level and the placement location, you're likely to be eligible. We've just got to look at we can't give you any outcomes unless we've actually done a full assessment. So I just really want to make that clear for anyone who's hoping to get some answers to kind of determine whether they're going to be eligible. We won't be able to determine that until we actually review your full completed application. How do you source a supervisor? I think perhaps where you're looking, and maybe you contact some of your colleagues who are practicing as a general practitioner now, and they may be able to support you. And somebody's asked a question about EUC. When you do submit your application for FSP, you're submitting a brand new application for FSP, and if you're submitting an extenuating and unforeseen application, you're doing that specifically for the FSP program as well. So regardless if you've actually applied in anything else, in any other programs or any other circumstances, you're actually you're completing one to support your application for the FSP program.
I have a couple of questions about exams. So how long after you complete the program you can sit the exam? So to be eligible for the fellowship exams, first and foremost, you need to satisfactorily complete the FSP education training component. You also need to have a satisfactory completion of the 2 years, the full 2 years, or 18 months, depending if you've been offered an RPLE. You need to have a valid general practice experience assessment of at least 1 year of comprehensive Australian general practice in the last 4 years. Obviously, you need to be holding appropriate medical registration throughout the training program, and you have been a financial member of the RACGP throughout the training program. And you need to have your candidacy, and you will be then able to sit the exams.
There's a question about when you apply and when you actually start the program. So the program, the applications that are open now from the 3rd of July, closing on the 27th of July, is for you starting the program in January 2024, and you need to be able to commit to starting in that placement that you nominate in your application for 6 months. If you don't think you're able to do that, then we encourage you to perhaps apply again next year, and the applications will open again in January or February next year. Archie, I think we've answered all the questions really. Thank you again for everyone attending this evening. Again, the email addresses are available on that screen should you have any specific questions relating to your application or eligibility, provider numbers, or the actual training program, or regarding your practice accreditation. Please get in touch with us. Thank you again, Prachi. Thank you, Krishma, for ensuring that we were able to deliver this webinar successfully. And thank you all for all the participants this evening to take time out of your day to actually come and say hello and listen to us talk about the Fellowship Support Program. We wish you all the best with your application and have a good evening. Thank you.